been an interesting couple of weeks on Thunderbird Garage. I've been waiting to get Walt's car running again. We had that flambe issue, and I've rewired a whole bunch of stuff. You can see it's a mess everywhere. Before I put it all back together, I want to make sure it runs. So this week on Thunderbird Garage, cross our fingers. Did we fix it?
Thunderbird Garage, where the classics come alive. 57 magic man, it's more than just a drive. Thunderbird Garage, let the good times thrive. Ooh.
Today on Thunderbird Garage, I want to bring you up to speed on some of the things that have happened, some of the things we've fixed. Some of you have followed the Thunderbird story, others not so much. So this is a quick kind of level set. So if we turn the dial back a month or so ago, you may remember that the old distributor was giving me some challenges. Performance just wasn't there, especially kind of top end, and the old distributor had already been converted to a Petronix. So this is about a 20-year-old Petronix unit going on here, maybe a little bit less than that. So I wanted to replace that. I got a new one of those, but as I began to look at the distributor, saw the ground on the distributor had fried, it just broken off. And so I said, okay, well, let's, with the new Petronix unit and a new ground wire, looks like this, I found. Got that, put the thing back together. But the vacuum advance I tested, this is the original vacuum advance from the car, and it wasn't holding a vacuum. So went out and looked for some replacements. This was talked about as a replacement. Does not fit, although it does hold vacuum. And then I got an original, rebuilt original here with the straight shaft for the 57 Thunderbird, and that seemingly solved all of the distributor issues. However, it also didn't hold vacuum in the vacuum test. So I was told, okay, Curt, clamp the brass fittings down really tightly and it should hold. And I actually did that, and I did thread seal on all of it, and we still have a defective remanufactured unit. That's a real challenge, especially when you try to find these things. They don't exist anymore. The only thing you can find is a restored original or rebuilt original, and even those certainly over the past couple of years have been less reliable than they could have been. I think the other thing that's challenging me is look at this. You've got the vacuum advance here, which has a whole bunch of different washers that have to be aligned perfectly inside there. Okay, there's that. And then you've got the outside brass seal, and then you've got the inside brass seal, and then you've got this kind of compression fitting with the aluminum or stainless steel hose that went over to the carburetor that I have a rubber fitting that goes to a nipple fitting on the carburetor. But originally that was also a threaded brass fitting. So how many points of failure, in addition to the actual vacuum advance, could you potentially introduce with this? That's just not sitting well with me. So I made a change. I said, after playing around with the third vacuum advance, I said no more. I said, I'm just not going to worry about the original distributor that was also a little tired. And remember, these distributors have a mechanical tack drive here. Goes from the dashboard via cable into here. So you have to find a distributor that has that. Well, Top Street Performance is a brand that has a new one. This is what we used in the car. This is a replica of that. I have a couple. I just wanted to back up in case I ever had an issue. So you've got a vacuum advance on this. You also have a mechanical advance inside here as well. So let me take you into this Top Street Performance distributor unit. So I've pulled off the rotor here, and as you can see, there's a mechanical advance. So think of this thing spinning. I'll hold that up to the camera here. So spinning with centrifugal force, and these weights spread outward and they adjust the timing. You can also play with it with a number of different springs here. You can make the springs tight, loose, whatever. But this is really easy to change. There's also a vacuum advance here. So remember, we've got two options. We've got the vacuum from the carburetor, the ported vacuum that in transition from an idle to an acceleration, the vacuum advance here does a nice job of shifting that. I know there's a whole bunch of arguments on the internet about manifold vacuum versus ported vacuum. I am a ported vacuum guy, especially with this. There's a reason pre-computer and pre all the technology that we have today, where these vacuum advances were great at kind of making that transition, and that's what they're good for. But you can also adjust this as well. I am keeping this very from the factory stock. So here's the little vacuum port here. There's actually an Allen wrench that you can go in and you can adjust. And all it adjusts is how far you actually advance the actual timing. It doesn't adjust when it kicks in. That's based on vacuum. So important to understand. So you get two things, the mechanical and vacuum. And remember, mechanical's driven by RPM. So this adjusts your timing based on speed. When you're under real load, these things are spinning really fast. The centrifugal weights are going out. That's when this comes into play. And the transition really from idle off the line with the vacuum advance here, just to make it nice and drivable around town. That's what this is for. I have to say, with a brand new vacuum advance, and certainly you can get things that are defective from the factory, 100%. But the idea that this is all new and it's also got a tack drive here, it had everything I needed. I just popped that sucker right in there. I should say popped it right in after about 25 tries, but and I was going to show you a whole bunch of stuff that I had done. I had kind of really gone back old school in finding top dead center. When I pulled this out, I could have just put the other distributor in. I wanted to force myself, and my son, who is a far better mechanic than I will ever be in this lifetime, said, "Dad, you get a scope, you go into the cylinder, and we're going to do it with technology." So he sort of forced me to kind of follow along some principles just to do a really good job and to better understand what was going on inside our cylinders. When I was finding top dead center, I had to pull out a spark plug too. And I saw that due to, I think, some of the distributor and some of the initial carb sizing, there was a little bit of buildup on the spark plugs, which were brand new as of 2-3 months ago. So I did clean those a little bit, but net, I put in this new distributor. It went in fine. Found top dead center, and then ended up kind of adjusting initial timing, base level timing, and I've actually tested it. I'll show that at the end of this video. And the car was really performant. I was really impressed. It really worked very well. And then I know you don't do this with your 57 Thunderbird. I did. I took it out to about 90, 95 miles an hour on the road. And granted, the speedometer in these things are a little enthusiastic, probably to the tune of about 6 miles per hour, and the thing was strong. I was really impressed. So this distributor, if you have got a 55, 56, and 57, granted this is a 12 volt, so if you got a 55, you're gonna have to do that conversion. But I was very pleasantly surprised. I am not getting rid of, some people online have said, "Oh my God, are you getting rid of your original distributor? It's a Ford distributor. It wasn't made by Prestolite or something else." Yes, I'm keeping it. It'll be good for posterity. It still isn't going to do a whole lot for me right now, but if I ever want to give it to someone purchasing the T-Bird in generations hence, they'll have that ability. The other thing, this resistor, which you all know and love, you've seen it on your Thunderbirds. For additional space, I've removed it because it's not needed, and it's actually kind of frowned upon when you're using the Petronics and the high output coil. I have a chrome high output coil as well. The reason I used a chrome coil is because I wanted it to feel a little bit more like the dress up kit on the cars. So the resistor I put off to the side. And then, as you can even see here, some of the wiring in the car was old. That's really tough to see there, but that's really brittle, and just due to heat over time, a lot of the insulation was kind of pulling back from where it should be. And then, now let's go back 2 weeks ago or 2.5 weeks ago, I was the dumb guy who ended up shorting and causing a little baby engine fire. And ultimately what I did was melt the ignition wire. So you can see a lot of really bad ignition wire here. And I replaced that along with a number of other pieces of wiring that I felt were either hacked together over the years or were just drying out. And a lot of the connections that went to the sensors or even onto the starter solenoid, I replaced those as well. The other thing I did is I went with 14 gauge wire for those wires, not the 16 or 18 from the factory. And I also put an inline fuse in a couple of other places, especially on the ignition, and you will see that later in the video as well. So I wanted to give you this type of an overview to let you know, went with the new distributor. I'll show you some pictures certainly of it going in, but to understand rationale as to why I did what I did. And now what I'll do is switch over in the video to show you kind of my wrap up with the wiring, and then I got a little OCD with some paint around the light switch and the ignition switch that I've cleaned up as well. And then we'll take it out for a quick drive on the road. The top was up because I had just done the top segment, so you'll see me talking inside a very loud passenger compartment with the top up as we test out the new distributor. So today I'm trying to finish up the pieces of wiring that I said I was going to redo. As I looked at the wiring that was damaged with that short, not everything was destroyed, which is great. I'll let you know as I reconnect everything whether I was correct about that. But a couple of things that I'm going to change. I am putting in this inline fuse. You cut this and then splice it in. I'm going to put this in the ignition circuit, which the cars did not have in the 50s. It would have prevented what I went through. Just a safety device going to put in there. I've sort of redone some of the wires here. This is actually for a fuel pump, an electric fuel pump that's at the tank for the car. So I've redone the connections there. This is the ignition wire as well. So I've tried to do some really nice ends and clean up some of the wiring. Some of the other things that needed to be changed were just some brittle wires that I saw. Some of the stuff for temperature and oil sending units, some of the connections and the wiring were just brittle and were too old. So I replaced those, once again, not the whole harness, but just very specific things, and sort of cleaned it up a little bit. The new distributor went in last night, and hopefully we will get ourselves back to a semblance of being sorted over the next day or so. But you can see that I've got some switches, both the ignition switch and the light switch that I've dropped down from the dashboard. I also use a dynamo label maker. Stole this from my wife. Please don't tell her. As I've tried to label some of the wiring just so I don't get lost under the dashboard. Because believe it or not, we talk about modern cars having a really tight under dash. There was not a lot of room, and since a lot of things weren't printed circuit boards or things like that, they just ran wires, and so there's a lot of extra wire underneath the dashboard here, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, that's a quick update as to where we are with wiring and distributor, and we hopefully will get back running soon. The moment of truth is upon us right now with Walt's car, and before I put everything back up onto the dashboard, I just want to see if this thing starts. In any event, let's grab this, make sure we don't short anything out onto the dashboard here. Put my key in here. Here. Okay. Here's something. Yes! It's running! How cool is that? The other thing you'll notice about the Thunderbird when you're putting in the switches, especially the ignition switch, and anything else, typically you'll need a tool to do that. This actually goes right into that keyway right there. So you're pushing in and turning as you're pushing from the back to get the ignition switch to catch in that in the keyway and behind. So anyway, as you guys know, this comes off here, and that's the little light up lens that's lit up by the bulb in back, and that's also keyed there. So you have to kind of align it right like that. And then we got to push from the back and use the key at the same time this key to make sure it locks. All right, the ignition switch is now back in place. It's locked in there, as you can see, not coming out, and still got wires hanging down. Now we have to do the actual light switch over on the right there. And since I know myself too well, once I put the light switch back on, I'm probably not going to want to go and touch up some of the painting. So I've just sanded a couple of cracks down, and I'm going to touch up that area before I put the light switch back. So Amazon is pretty good about kids supplies. So I bought some cheap throwaway paintbrushes that kids would use in art class. And I am just going to try to let you see me touching up around here. I'll try to feather it in so you don't know it. And that will dry over time. Around here. Looks like the paint doesn't match, but actually when it dries, it does, which is awesome. All right, I'm gonna let that dry a little bit here, and then I'm gonna try to put on the light switch, just like we did the ignition switch. What's the old expression, watching paint dry? Here's a cheat. So we tightened up the trim pieces, we pushed this rod in, pushing it all the way to lock it into the switch, and now when we pull it back, it's operating the way it should. Remember in the short we showed that to release this rod, because the actual trim piece on the handle is connected to it, so you can't remove this like you would a radio knob. So you actually have to push the button at the underneath side of the switch to release the shaft and pull the light shaft out. But in any event, we are back together. Now we just have to clean up some of the crap underneath here and hang it appropriately. I'm going to take us on a little bit more of a straightaway where we can test kind of the flat-out acceleration here, but pretty responsive, smooth power delivery. I'm going to punch it now. That's nice. Very smooth. Very nice. Yeah, nice shift. Perfect. It's noisy in here, but yeah, that's what I'm looking for. It's just a super smooth power delivery, nothing crazy. That's what these cars were meant to be, and I think a lot of people have misunderstood that. I also like the fact that I've upgraded to a more modern distributor, and to be perfectly honest, just trying to maintain that old vacuum advance is not great. You just can't get them anymore, and when you do, they all leak. So this kind of hybrid distributor setup of the both the vacuum advance and the mechanical advance, I think is optimal for the car. And yeah, I mean, right now it's running really well. So and we are roughly at about 2,000 RPMs right now. Maybe on the highway we're up to 3. Remember, this car is not designed to be a 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 RPM machine. It's much more sedate than that. In any event, that's this episode of Thunderbird Garage.